captivated the country.
My wife and child got badly.
Oh my God, they got targeted.
What's going on here?
We are following breaking news from South Carolina.
The major developments in the Murdaugh case.
Just yesterday, charges were announced for the murders of a mother and son from a prominent Southern family.
We could be one step closer to finding out who killed Paul and Maggie Murdaugh.
And who authorities claim committed these murders will floor you. But this whole sordid tale really begins years earlier with some teenagers on a boat.
They're going to drink, they're going to party. Nobody saw the tragedy coming.
The teens were terrified from the start.
This whole scene was chaos.
And Mallory's nowhere to be found.
I hung up the phone and said, no, God, not my child.
I'm worried about finding my child, and they're worried about how they're going to cover up Paul driving.
Maybe he's going to get away with it. He's a Murdaugh.
You see this upscale, wealthy, happy family. And when you look at reality, there were some real cracks in that family.
The boat crash was the first domino that really fell for them.
Oh, he's not dead.
He's telling them that SOB killed my girlfriend. If you had to sum up this entire saga with one sentence, it would be the fall of the House of Murdaugh.
This was supposed to be just another normal night for 6 friends from the small town of Hampton, South Carolina. They were supposed to go out on the boat around the Low Country, have a few drinks, just a little fun.
There were 6 people on the boat, 3 couples.
These are kids who grew up together. They played together as kids, and they went out on boats all the time.
They were all together that night because the girls wanted to do a date night.
Honestly, sounds like a very typical thing to do for South Carolina teens.
But this night was going to take a violent,
I could tell he was drunk as he just as a whole other person when he's drunk.
deadly turn.
I saw the bridge coming, and I screamed.
Imagine, there were 6 of you. Now you look around and somebody's missing.
What these kids go through tears friendships apart. Oh, you smiling like funny. Girl's been gone, folks.
What happens on this night begins an unraveling of sorts that takes down a legal dynasty that had been powerful in these parts for more than a century. In the area, the Murdaughs weren't above the law, they were the law.
The name still brings respect or even fear to some people.
All of these kids were very, very aware of how much power and influence that the Murdaugh family had.
I'm from South Carolina, and this would set off one of the most notorious sagas my home state has ever seen.
The FBI is now involved in the Murdaugh investigation.
The entire history of this newspaper, this is the biggest, most impactful story that we've ever covered. Even as it sprawls across the Low Country, this is a story that engulfs Hampton County people and Hampton County families.
Hampton is a very small town in South Carolina. It's in the Low Country of South Carolina. Palmetto trees, sweepy Spanish moss everywhere. Swampy is probably a word that you would describe the Low Country, but beautiful setting.
There's an occasional church. There's an occasional farm. There's a Piggly Wiggly grocery store.
It's a quiet town. Everybody knows everybody, that's for sure.
And they're all in everybody's business, that type of small town life.
You don't just know everyone, you know like everyone's grandma and their cousin.
You do. But it's also good if something happens, it's just, you're like one big family.
When you live in a small town, you sort of have a personal relationship with everybody. And if I could help you at some point, I would help you.
Before these Murdaugh cases started happening, if you knew where Hampton County was at all, you associated us with the Watermelon Festival. Started in 1939. There used to be a seed spitting contest. The mayor of every town would get together to see who could spit a watermelon seed the farthest. Welcome to life in the rural South, right? There's a lot of family pride here. Families and generations have lived here, just like you see in the Murdaugh family.
Our family's very close, like most families down here. You know, most folks
have roots here, usually, and have family here. And we certainly did.
We have to go back to the history of the Murdaugh family, and it goes back a very long time.
This family has been there for over a century, powerful in the legal community, elected prosecutors for 3 generations.
For 85 consecutive years, some member of the Murdaugh family was the solicitor.
What we call solicitor in other states is district attorney.
Specifically, my great-grandfather, my grandfather, and my father were solicitors.
There was Randolph Murdaugh Sr., then Randolph Buster Murdaugh Jr., and then Randolph Randy Murdaugh III.
They were the big fish in the small pond.
You're the person that the community looks to keep you safe, to prosecute the people who do wrong. And so it is a powerful position.
Not only do they have this built-in system of power, by nature, a prosecutor and a law enforcement officer, whether it be a sheriff or a police chief, have to work together. But the Murdaughs took it further, and it was a social thing. They might go hunting or fishing with the Jasper County Sheriff. They might drink whiskey with the Beaufort County Sheriff. They might invite the Hampton County Sheriff over to the house for barbecue.
In addition to the Murdaugh's history in the solicitor's office, they also founded a prestigious civil firm more than 100 years ago.
So no matter what you were doing in the legal field, whether it was criminal or civil, chances are you're going to bump up against a Murdaugh.
So it's into this family of power and privilege that Paul Murdaugh is born. His father, Alec, is a prominent lawyer, his mother, Maggie, and his older brother, who's known as Buster.
That night, Paul Murdaugh and 5 of his friends decided that they were going to do a date night.
3 couples who planned on getting on board the Murdaugh boat and traveling to an oyster roast, doing what people in the low country do. We ride around in boats.
So this was a Saturday night. These 3 couples were going out. Paul Murdaugh was there with his girlfriend, Morgan Dowdy. Anthony Cook was there with his girlfriend, Mallory Beach. And Anthony's first cousin, Connor Cook, was with his girlfriend, Miley Altman.
Paul, who was 19 at the time, was borrowing his father, Alec Murdaugh's boat for the night. And it was a 17-foot center console boat, so it wasn't very big for 6 kids.
They're going to drink, they're going to party, they're just going to have a good evening together. And nobody saw the tragedy coming.
According to depositions, they went to Parker's, which is a local gas station.
We can see the video that night where Paul is hauling the boat and he parks at Parker's and he goes in.
When he goes in the store, he's not 21.
He's not. He's 19.
So do they check his ID?
He had his brother's ID, and he hands it to the clerk.
And as Paul's leaving Parker's, he actually lifts his hands, displaying his new purchase to his friends. Look what we've got for our party on the boat.
But that night on the boat, the party is going to take a turn.
The teenagers said that it was very clear that Paul Murdaugh was extremely intoxicated.
His behavior was getting increasingly belligerent. Paul was saying, "This is my boat. Nobody else is driving it."
He was bordering on a rage.
And that's when the boat accelerated.
These kids were terrified.
And he was being very reckless, and Morgan was like, "You have like vines in your hands right now. You need to like stop."
The whole scene was chaos.
911, where's your emergency?
We're in a boat crash and one is missing.
And Mallory's nowhere to be found.
February the 23rd is really the seminal event that most will agree began this unraveling of the fortunes of the Murdaugh family. It was to be an afternoon of fun for these 6 young people. Unfortunately, that was not to be this night.
So all 6 of them congregate at about 6:30 to get in the boat.
They leave and they go to the oyster roast for about 5 hours.
It's a cookout of sorts, and they roast oysters, and they do what's called a low country boil, where they boil shrimp and sausage and potatoes.
And they kept going back to the boat to drink. They weren't drinking in front of everyone. Paul's uncle was there too.
And were people drinking at this event?
Some people were.
Did he look like he was really drunk at the event?
He didn't look like that to me.
So just after midnight, the group leaves the oyster roast and they go to downtown Beaufort to a place called Luther's.
According to depositions, Paul wants to take a shot. He's not done with the night yet.
If you've ever been out drinking, alcohol talks to you and plans emerge in your head. Some of the ladies wanted to go home. But Paul, it was his boat. He was driving and he wanted to go get a shot. There's video footage. We can see them walking on the dock.
You can tell that the girls and Anthony do not want to go, but Paul and Connor want to go to the bar.
We can see in that video that they have a couple of shots. They stay for about 10 minutes, and then they head back to their friends on the dock.
Paul he's swaying. I mean, he clearly is intoxicated.
Mallory and Anthony were sharing such sweet moments. It's heartbreaking because you know what's about to happen to them.
The following day, Miley Altman does an interview with law enforcement, and it's videotaped.
It provides a first clear-headed window into the chaos and confusion about what happened that night.
You said you noticed that Paul was getting kind of drunk?
I could tell he was drunk because he gets drunk a lot, and it's just kind of like he just is a whole other person when he's drunk.
According to depositions, Paul changed so much when he drank that his friends, when he started getting aggressive, they'd be like, that's Timmy. Timmy is his alter ego when he gets drunk.
For some reason, in Paul's drunken stupor, he takes off his clothes and he's standing there in his boxer shorts.
So some point on the boat ride, he just took all of his clothes off?
Yeah. They said when he got drunk like that's what he would do, is take his clothes off because he's angry.
Paul was just driving and doing donuts, and we're not going anywhere. We're just doing circles, and Morgan gets mad and yells at him and was like, listen, you need to stop. I want to go home.
And his behavior was getting increasingly belligerent.
Did Paul have an issue with drinking that you guys know of?
What do you mean by that?
Drinking too much, becoming belligerent when he was drunk.
I mean, I've seen him drink, but no, I would categorize him as like everyone else.
Paul was saying, this is my boat. Nobody else is driving it.
And they are telling him, let Connor drive. You can't drive.
We were just like, anything is better than Paul right now because, who knows, what he would do. Because, he was, riding it close to, sailboats that were parked and just, being very reckless.
The testimony was Mallory asked to be let off, but, there comes a point where there's no place to get off. And he wouldn't stop and wouldn't let anybody else drive.
According to depositions, Paul Murdaugh even had an altercation with his girlfriend.
He would leave the wheel and run up to the front of the boat where his girlfriend was and yell and scream at her.
And he just started calling her a bitch and was like, you're such a whore and all this kind of stuff, and was literally yelling at her, and Morgan was yelling at him too, and he got this close to her face.
He slapped Morgan, he spit on her and cursed her.
When Paul would step away from the wheel, the boat would be dropped back into near neutral, an idling speed.
And then at that time, Connor would grab the wheel and kind of make sure they were steady.
And that is the extent of Connor's operation of the boat.
Paul's behavior on the boat that night. They said he hit his girlfriend. Is that behavior that you guys were aware of?
No, I've never seen Paul do that. And I'm not saying he didn't do it that night. I don't know the answer to that, but I would be very surprised. I've never seen that happen before.
Eventually, Paul, he's like, y'all want to go home? We're going home. So he puts the throttle down, planes the boat out.
And they go here, where they turn into Archer's Creek. Now you can see in this picture that Archer's Creek is a narrow, very winding waterway.
There's no big, bright searchlights on this boat. One of the boys was holding a flashlight ahead of them while they were driving.
The boat's going pretty fast at this point. Mallory is on Anthony's lap.
Mallory was in the back of the boat, seated on a cooler that's immediately behind the console.
GPS records tell us the boat was traveling somewhere between 32 to 34 miles per hour.
I saw the bridge coming, and I was just getting shocked. And then, at the last second, I screamed.
The boat had a dolphin head, which is 3 pylons that are sort of lashed together.
The boat hits the piling. It throws Anthony and Mallory into the water, and Mallory's nowhere to be found.
There's a panic that starts. There's a feeling that this isn't just a little accident. This is really, really bad.
Connor had his phone still on him, so I was calling 911.
It's absolutely disturbing. You hear screaming in the background, screaming for Mallory.
We're calling, okay?
It just sounds like chaos.
911, where's your emergency? Hello?
So when the boat hits, it's a bad crash. Everybody's kind of thrown around, and Mallory Beach is thrown off the boat.
Who calls 911?
Connor called 911.
We had a boat crash on Arthur Street.
Whereabouts on Arthur Street?
In Arthur Street, the only bridge on Arthur Street. We have someone missing.
At first, nobody can pinpoint exactly which bridge and which river they're talking about.
Is everybody there? Is anybody injured?
Morgan's hand is injured. She's bleeding. Connor has a fracture in his jaw and a laceration where he hit the console during the impact. Paul is in the water, comes out of the water. He's only wearing his boxer shorts. Anthony apparently injures his shoulder, and then Mallory's missing.
Please send someone.
No, we're calling, okay?
How far? I'll be across the Bell Bridge.
People arrive on the scene. Who shows up?
Beaufort County Sheriff's Department shows up. Port Royal Police Department responds. Paris Island Marshal's Office responds.
Between EMS, fire, and police, the first job is to find Mallory.
I got a call from my mom to ask me if Mallory was home with me, and I told her no, and she just said that there had been a boat accident.
I had a phone call from Mallory's mom. She was frantic. I hung up the phone and said, "No, God, not my child."
What was she like as a baby?
Very headstrong. She was the child that had to be near you all the time.
What kind of things did she like?
Animals, any type. She didn't care.
She followed me everywhere I went. She wanted to do what I did. She could be a lady when she needed to be a lady, and she could be a tomboy, so to speak.
I lost my paddle.
She loved hunting and fishing.
She just never met a stranger. She was always a people person.
Well, I actually taught her for elementary school as well as middle school. Very energetic, very bright, very effervescent sort of young lady.
At what point did she meet Anthony?
We went to church with his family, so they've actually known each other since they were very small.
Were you surprised to find out that she was dating him or that she liked him?
She wouldn't talk to me about boys, but then kind of put two and two together, and
She was happy with him when she left that night when I spoke to her before they went out. I knew she was happy.
So you just got in the car and headed in the direction of the crash?
Yes.
This scene is chaos from the start. You've got law enforcement from several different agencies responding.
Technically, the Department of Natural Resources, which is our wildlife law enforcement agency, has jurisdiction.
And in South Carolina, when there's a boat crash, that is DNR's investigation.
But I think that there were ample law enforcement authorities there to begin an investigation to determine who was driving and how this accident occurred.
We've seen the dash cam video from the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office. There were a couple of cars on the scene and their cameras were rolling. So you don't really see a lot, but you hear a lot.
One of the people you do see on the dash cam footage is Anthony Cook, Mallory's boyfriend. He's crying and he just looks devastated. And at certain points, you can hear him talking to a deputy.
My girlfriend, I ain't gonna live myself.
He can still see Paul walking around.
He can.
And what kind of a reaction does that?
He screams at him.
Get that right there away from me. Well, you smiling like you funny. Sit down, sit down. My girlfriend gone, folks. Sit down. You think it's funny? Sit down, sit down. Oh, you rock down.
Anthony Cook is losing his mind. He's telling them that SOB killed my girlfriend.
And part of what Anthony was so upset about that night was this idea that Paul wasn't going to get in trouble. He has a conversation with this officer to that point.
He does. He asked him, does he know who his father is?
You all know Alec Murdaugh? That's his son. That's no problem. Good luck.
And he says he's never going to go to jail.
This crash response is further evidence of the Murdaugh's connections around the five-county area.
Now remember, and think about this, Paul Murdaugh's grandfather is the former solicitor in this area, and his dad, Alex Murdaugh, is a prominent lawyer, and at the time of the crash was even a volunteer prosecutor for the current solicitor.
And according to depositions, at least 3 members of law enforcement on the scene that night had a connection to the Murdaughs.
There was one guy there who said he played in a golf tournament that was hosted by the Murdaughs. There was one guy there who said he had been invited to the house, and his wife worked at the law firm for a period of time. There was another officer there who, the Murdaugh law firm, had gotten his mother a large settlement in a recent personal injury suit.
So we do hear Paul at some point.
You do. He asked to use the officer's phone.
Can I use your phone? Hey, bro, I ain't got my phone on me, bro. You ain't got your phone on you? No, you dropped yours in the grass right back there. What's your last name? Murdaugh. M-U-R-D-A-U-G-H.
And then the officer begins to get his personal information, and Paul, again, he asks, can I use your phone?
Here, stay right here. I'm going to go get that one you dropped on the ground back there, all right?
Sounds like 2 adults, which are likely officers. You can hear them say that they found Paul's phone.
You got it already? Yeah.
You hear someone has picked up Paul's phone.
Correct.
And it's not in the evidence.
It's not.
There is an unusual amount of evidence that seems to be unaccounted for. Paul Murdaugh's clothing, his pants, his cell phone, wallet, these are things not accounted for.
Why wasn't that submitted to evidence? Because this is a crime scene. That's what you do in a case like this.
A Beaufort County Sheriff's officer would later testify that he saw the cell phone, but he didn't collect it because he thought the investigation would ultimately be turned over to the Department of Natural Resources. He thought his agency was only there to assist.
A deposition from a DNR officer who was at the scene indicated he never saw Paul Murdaugh's cell phone, his wallet, or his clothes, but just about everyone at the scene noticed how Paul was acting.
Paul is still being aggressive. Paul is still acting like he's drunk.
Paul was just like going on and on and on. He got into the officer's face and was like, you think that you're like a bigger man than I am?
Paul was having this conversation with the officer?
The police officer.
And so you would think that that would be a signal to the first responders that they need to do a field sobriety test, but that isn't done.
While the other kids have all now gone to the hospital, Anthony Cook is refusing to leave without his girlfriend. And Mallory's parents are now there as well, desperately hoping for any news on their daughter.
I just kept praying that they would see her like on a sandbar or somewhere, that she just couldn't get to us, but she was safe.
So there are investigators there at the hospital, and they're trying to figure out what happened.
A DNR officer says he's trying to talk to Paul when in walk his father and his grandfather. And they say, look, that's it. You're done.
Was the Murdaugh family trying to protect Paul, trying to steer the blame to somebody else?
Do you think anyone in your family interfered in any way with the investigation?
That night at the hospital, Paul is strapped to a gurney because they were afraid of him being violent.
So they drew his blood. At 4 a.m., 2 hours after the crash, he was more than 3 times over the legal limit for driving.
So there are investigators there at the hospital, and they're trying to figure out what happened. That's their job to do.
A DNR officer says he's trying to talk to Paul when in walks his grandfather and father, and the whole thing stops.
Alex and Randolph Murdaugh come in. All right, it's not just a concerned parent and a concerned grandfather. You've got 2 attorneys walk in. Randolph was reported as saying, you're not talking to him anymore, you're talking to us. We're his attorneys, okay?
It's understood why they wouldn't want to protect their child. But then you have to look at the fact that there was a tragedy that was involved.
Witnesses like medical personnel became concerned about Alec Murdaugh's movement around the treatment rooms.
We also know from court records that Alex went from room to room, telling these young kids to be quiet, don't talk. Connor Cook's testimony is particularly important. He's in a wheelchair being transferred to have his jaw examined, and Alex stops him in the hallway to try to talk to him.
Alec Murdaugh says, you don't have to tell anyone who was driving. We're going to take care of this. You don't have to say anything. And Connor doesn't.
In a legal filing, Alec Murdaugh has denied telling Connor Cook not to cooperate with law enforcement.
Although there was no indication in the investigative file that Paul Murdaugh was asked to perform a sobriety test, and keep in mind, his family owned the boat, and he was clearly very intoxicated that night, someone else was asked to, Connor Cook, but he refused.
I think his parents began to develop that concern that somehow things were off kilter here. Their son was being wrongly focused on as the possible operator of the boat.
Law enforcement interviews with people at the hospital that night suggest that many of them thought that Paul's grandfather and father's main goal was to protect Paul.
I've never been involved in a fatality where the operator of a vehicle was under the influence that person didn't go to jail immediately.
Immediately.
You or I would have been wearing an orange jumpsuit before daylight.
But after he's evaluated at the hospital that night, Paul Murdaugh's allowed to go home with his family.
Do you think anyone in your family interfered in any way with the investigation?
None whatsoever.
No one, I'll ask you both directly just so that we're clear. No one made a phone call to a law enforcement person. No one reached out to DNR or anything trying to influence.
I can speak to that. I certainly did it, and I know of nobody that did.
You know, I have friends in those agencies, but no one that I know of reached out and tried to influence it whatsoever.
We reached out to Alec Murdaugh's team about the allegations that he tried to interfere in the crash investigation, but they declined to comment. Do you think that their prominence in this area played a part in how this investigation was conducted?
I think there's certainly a lot of connections the people that were involved have with the family.
Why the investigation was not done in a more professional way is something we intend to find out. Whether that was a function of interference, whether it was a function of law enforcement relationship with the Murdaugh family, deference to them, or something worse, is exactly what we're going to be exploring.
We reached out to the Department of Natural Resources and the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office with questions regarding the handling of the investigation, but both agencies declined to comment.
And now we've learned that the South Carolina State Law Enforcement Division has launched a criminal probe into whether Alec Murdaugh obstructed justice in the boat crash investigation.
And so that night, I'm worried about finding my child, and they're worried about how they're going to cover up Paul driving.
The search for Mallory Beach went on a whole week. It was huge. The community really rallied.
Did you go to the boat landing, to that area every day?
Every day.
The lead agency on the search is South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, but this is very much a multi-agency effort.
You had DNR searching, Coast Guard searching, volunteers, anybody with a boat. They were putting it in the water and they were looking for Mallory.
We've been getting bits and pieces of information about they're still looking for the body, they haven't found the body. And you know that the longer it's drawn out, the more likely that the results aren't going to be what you want them to be.
I prayed every day, Lord, I wanted some closure. And we prayed for that closure for 7 days. And on the 8th day was a Sunday. We went to church.
We left church and decided to drive on after church towards the landing.
And we seen these cars pull up, and I looked at this one gentleman did his shirt and it said corner on it.
You saw his shirt and you knew?
Oh, yeah.
911, where's your emergency?
We're on the search team rescue. We think we found her.
Mallory's body is found a week later by two fishermen about 5 miles away from the crash site.
So I know there's so many times that people go missing and they never find the body, but it was like a closure for that.
Open Arms Fellowship Church in Hampton, South Carolina was packed with people who came to say goodbye one last time.
There were hundreds of people at her funeral in Hampton County.
A lot of people that were coming to just support the family, to give them our condolences.
Then, in the days and weeks to come, you began to see this wondering, is justice going to be served? There was talk of a whisper campaign to cover this thing up.
Were you worried that there wasn't going to be a charge for what happened?
Yes, I was worried about that. Just being from the family that he's from, it would be probably a cover-up.
You thought that from the first day?
I did.
It did feel as though it was the beginning of quite a drama.
But nobody could have envisioned just how dramatic a turn this case was going to take.
I got a call from Alec. As soon as I hit the phone, I knew something was wrong.
This is Alec Murdaugh. I need the police to stand just immediately. Stay on the line with me, okay? Yes, sir. Stay on the line with me, okay?
Today marks the third day since the boater went missing near Paris Island.
911, where's your emergency?
We're on the search team rescue. We think we found her.
It took a week to find her.
Paul is not charged, even after she's found. A month goes by, he's not charged. And people in the community, some thought, maybe he's going to get away with it. He's a Murdaugh.
Within weeks of the boat crash, Mallory Beach's mother files a civil lawsuit against the convenience store where the alcohol was purchased and against Paul Murdaugh's father, Alec, and his older brother, Buster.
What was the reason for why you guys filed the civil suit?
What motivated me was getting evidence of everything. I knew who we were up against and how things would probably disappear if we didn't act quickly.
Her life meant something. For us, she was our baby. We had to defend her honor.
The Beaches particularly thought that it's important to make sure that the people who enabled this to happen are held accountable.
His brother's the one that gave him his ID to use to buy alcohol illegally. His dad is the one who never made him be accountable for his actions.
In response to Mallory's mom's lawsuit, Parker's, that convenience store where Paul purchased alcohol, denies that it knowingly and willfully sold alcohol to a minor.
For their part, the Murdaugh attorneys deny all wrongdoing alleged in this suit. They deny that Buster knowingly gave Paul his ID, and they deny even that Paul was driving the boat at the time of the crash.
I didn't want to take sides. I just wanted justice to be served, yes, but I didn't want this tragedy to be any more devastating for our community than it already was.
Did the dynamic in the community towards Paul and even towards your family, did that shift after that accident happened?
People that knew Paul didn't. He was not favorably portrayed in the news.
Do you feel like some of the perception of your family has been wrong?
Yes. I see words like dynasty used and power. And I don't know exactly how people use those words, but we're just regular people. And I think this perception of power is not right.
So you don't think your family has power?
I don't view my family that way at all.
You knew who they were?
I knew who they were.
Do you feel like they're a powerful family?
I do.
What makes them seem powerful?
Like above the law. Like the law didn't pertain to them. I wanted accountability. I wanted Paul to just own up to, yes, I was driving the boat. It was an accident. I'm sorry.
This was a group of friends who went out on a boat. Some very bad things happened. Paul was sad. One of his friends was killed. Paul was very sad about that.
We all doubted that there would ever be charges, but we kept covering it and kept pressuring DNR. What are you guys doing? What's taking so long? It took nearly 2 months, but Paul Murdaugh was charged with 3 voting under the influence felony counts on April 18th, which was Mallory Beach's birthday. If convicted, he was facing up to 25 years in prison.
As powerful as the Murdaughs are, they could not prevent Paul being charged with voting under the influence 3 counts. Now, the local prosecutor didn't handle it. It got turned over to the Attorney General's office.
What was your reaction to hearing that he had been charged finally?
I was pleased that finally it was starting to move forward.
When we found out that Paul was charged, I thought for sure he'll at least have to spend some time in jail. He'll have to wear the orange jumpsuit like everybody else in Beaufort County does. That's what happens.
Instead of being arrested and taken to a jail, Paul Murdaugh's attorneys were able to arrange for him to come to court and be arraigned and booked there.
I heard it described as a gentleman's treatment, if you will. He was not handcuffed in the courtroom.
When one of the deputies, after he's arraigned, went to cuff him, which is the procedure, he was waved off by the prosecutor. No, not necessary here.
Later that day, I asked the Attorney General's office for a mugshot, and I opened the files of that photo and saw the properties, and it was taken from an iPhone 7 in the hallway of the courthouse.
Who has their mugshot taken in the hallway of the courthouse? I've never seen that.
Paul Murdaugh was released on his own recognizance, and for 2 years, this case just dragged on. Many people thinking he would never have a day in court. But then in June, something happened that stunned not just South Carolina, but the whole country.
On June 7th, 2021, the world changed for the Murdaugh family, and the world changed for Hampton County.
Standing now on what's your emergency?
This is Alex Murdaugh. I need the police to stand just immediately. My wife and child just got badly.
On the night of June 7th, there's this 911 call, and it's Alec Murdaugh. He's panicked.
He has just found his wife and his youngest son shot to death.
People are thinking, wait, another young person from this boat crash has tragically died?
I have an Alex Murdaugh on the line. He's advising that his wife and child was shot. Stop it up to it now. It's bad.
Are they breathing?
No, ma'am.
The media coverage just exploded immediately. National news outlets started descending upon the scene.
Everyone is asking who could have killed them.
The young man who allegedly killed Mallory Beach has been shot and killed. Was his backwoods justice? Now this story becomes an international murder mystery.
Everything started to come undone.
Standing now on what's your emergency?
This is Alex Murdaugh. My wife and child just got badly.
What information could you find in a double homicide that leads you back to a 2015 supposed hit and run?
Law enforcement in Hampton County is investigating a hit and run that claimed the life of a teenager.
Everybody keeps coming up to me and saying it was Murdaugh boys, whoever they are.
Alec Murdaugh was shot in the head and wounded on a rural country road yesterday.
It's like, what? Alec Murdaugh got shot? I mean, his wife and son have just been killed, and now he's been shot?
How many disasters can happen in one family?
It just took this story to a whole nother level.
The murder mystery in South Carolina taking a bizarre turn.
And now all the new details about the charges just filed for the murders of Paul and Maggie Murdaugh, who police claim did it, is a stunner.
Two members of a well-known low-country family were discovered overnight.
No arrests have been made, no suspects named. The FBI is now involved in the Murdaugh investigation.
This is a story that for months gripped not just the state of South Carolina, but the whole country.
You never know what the next twist and turn is going to be. Every time something happens, your jaw drops and you gasp.
I feel like I'm in a three-ring circus. There's no bottom to this case. I'm shocked every single day.
There are more new details. Alex Murdaugh calling 911 for help for a gunshot wound to the head.
It's got all the elements of a great story.
There's murder, but there's also deceit, there's lies. It's like a soap opera.
The Murdaughs issuing a plea for help.
John Grissom, all he has to do is come to South Carolina and just write nonfiction. There's no fiction here.
I have been following this story since 2019, and I've always thought that it would make for a really good podcast. Ever since I heard the news of the boat crash on February 24th, 2019, I just couldn't stop. There's just so many different angles and different storylines. My name is Mandy Matney. I'm the news director at FitzNews.com, and this is the Murdaugh Murders podcast. Within South Carolina, just so many people know who this family is. And then the double homicide happened.
I need to believe the answers immediately. My wife had stuff bad with me.
On June 7th, 2021, at 10:07 p.m., Alec Murdaugh calls 911 and he is frantic.
Are they breathing? No, ma'am. Okay, and you said it's your wife and your son? My wife and my son.
The scene that Alec Murdaugh is looking at is his 52-year-old wife, Maggie, and his 22-year-old son, Paul.
Is he moving at all, your son? I know you said that she was shot, but what about your son? Nobody. They're not. Neither one of them moving.
The mother and the son were found dead, not too far from each other, near a dog kennel.
They were both shot to death outside their property, a place they call Moselle.
Moselle was basically their primary residence at that time.
Do you see anyone in the area? No, ma'am. Did you hear anything, or did you come home and find them? I've been gone. I just came back.
When you look at where this is, I mean, it's surrounded by woods. It's in a real remote area.
Please hurry. We're getting somebody out there to you. Ma'am, I'm going to call. I need to call some of my family.
When did you hear from Alec that something had happened at his property?
So I got a call from Alec Monday night. And as soon as I answered the phone, I knew something was wrong. He said, "Come as fast as you can. Paul and Maggie have been hurt." I dropped the phone and got dressed and started driving.
He was just distraught. I didn't know if something was still happening. He was only able to tell me it was very, very bad. He said he thought they were dead. And of course I rushed over.
When you got there, what was he doing?
I couldn't believe it was true. I could see the white sheets. I still couldn't believe it could be them. There were first responders there. My focus was to go to my brother. He was standing at a distance, looking on, like in disbelief, crying.
Could he tell you anything about what happened?
He had a difficult time talking, and he would try to talk, and he would break down.
Alec and Maggie Murdaugh also had an older son, Buster.
Buster came later because I think he had to drive from Rock Hill.
Oh, so he doesn't live in this area?
That's right.
Who called him?
Alec tried to call him, and he got through to him, and he tried to tell him, but he broke down and couldn't. And so I got on the phone with him.
That's a long drive to make.
It's a very long drive to make.
Colleton County Sheriff's Office immediately responded to the 911, but it seems like within minutes, they called the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, which we call SLED, and SLED took over the case. They discovered these two bodies on their 1,700-acre property.
We're talking about a sprawling property that there's a main home, and then there are dog kennels that are hundreds of yards away.
It was in that area that they were killed.
The shell casings that are found later will show that they were shot by two different firearms.
We were able to find out that one of the guns was a semi-automatic rifle and the other one was a shotgun.
It raised all sorts of questions. Why were they shot with these two different guns? Were there two shooters?
The coroner tells us that the killings happened sometime between 9 and 9:30 p.m.
Your brother was at your mom's house the night of the shootings.
He had gone to visit my mom. My dad was in the hospital.
So he was just making sure she was all right that night.
You know, she tends to get anxious when he's not around. You know, she has dementia, and he was just going to check on her.
In a double homicide, I think it's pretty clear that you look at the family first.
And according to his own lawyers, Alec Murdaugh himself immediately becomes a person of interest.
There's no possible way he could have anything to do with this. I can assure you.
I can tell you, he was willing and still is willing to do anything that's asked of him. He wants this solved.
This morning, a grieving family looking for answers.
National news outlets started descending upon the state. Every major newspaper in the United States, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and even the Daily Mail.
The family releasing a statement saying they are devastated by the deaths.
Law enforcement put out a statement the next day that said, at this time, there is no danger to the public.
I was really scratching my head because generally when you say something like that, you have a good idea who did it. They must believe that the Murdaughs were targeted.
One of the more common comments that I heard on the street was, this must have something to do with that boat crash.
The Beaches never wanted anything like this to happen. They didn't. So we volunteered to give DNA and statements so they could be excluded, which they were.
We've heard that statement that you finally got justice. This is not justice for us. These people were brutally murdered, and he did not deserve it, neither did his mama.
Do you have any idea who would have done this? Do they have any enemies?
I really don't know of any enemies. You hear all this talk on the social media with regard to Paul.
I've heard that Paul had gotten some threats.
I knew generally about him, yes.
But as reporters are digging into everything associated with the Murdaugh family, they discover that Mallory Beach's death isn't the only untimely death that seems to be connected to this family.
They learn about a young man named Stephen Smith who was found dead in the middle of the road.
Law enforcement in Hampton County is investigating a hit and run that claimed the life of a teenager.
They began interviewing people who may have known Stephen. The name Murdaugh pops up numerous times.
I was like, what's going on here?
While no suspects have been publicly named in the double murders of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh, the investigation is raising more questions about this prominent family. You see, just 2 weeks after the homicides, another case from 2015 resurfaces.
SLED has reopened a cold case involving the death of 19-year-old Stephen Smith. The agency said they made the decision based on information gathered while investigating the double murder of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh.
Smith's body was found more than 6 years ago in the middle of a road in Hampton County. His family says how he died has long been in question.
Around 4 a.m. on July 8th, 2015, a man named Ronnie Cavers called 911 and said that he saw a man in the road in Hampton County, South Carolina.
Hampton County 911, where's your emergency?
I see somebody laying out.
He sees a kid in the road, but he doesn't stop.
And is it in the road or on the side of the road?
He in the road. Somebody boy hit him in the dark.
All right, we'll get an officer headed out that way.
Stephen has a 7-inch gash on the right side of his forehead, and his head is caved in. It looks like from force of some kind.
Toxicology reports don't indicate he was under the influence of anything.
His car was a couple miles away, and it was out of gas, and the cap was hanging out.
There's no tire marks. There's no pieces of car. No debris. Just a 19-year-old kid dead in the middle of the road.
Stephen Smith was 19 years old. He was a twin. He had a sister, Stephanie. He lived with his mother, Sandy Smith.
The doctor said, "Do you see what I see?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh." And there was 2.
Steven was funny, the life of the party, very intelligent, sassy. We were always together. We would always do anything together, regardless if I wanted to do it or not.
There's hardly words to describe him. Jubilant, crazy, an actor. He could cry on a dime.
His hair had to be perfect. His makeup had to be perfect. He didn't miss a beat.
And he was openly gay in this very small town, which could not have been easy.
Not an easy thing, but his family accepted it.
I know a lot of people ask me, when did Stephen come out? And he never had to come out, you know, because it's just something we knew. And it didn't matter to us. I was so proud of him, you know, because his favorite saying is, I am who I am, and God made me, and God don't make mistakes. Once he started high school, he knew what he wanted out of life.
He had plans to get out of Hampton. He was not gonna stay there.
He was going to get his nursing degree and then work his way up to a medical doctor and go overseas to take care of children who did not have any medical attention. That was his dream.
I wanted to see him be the doctor that he wanted to be, because he always talked about helping people, and that's what Stephen did.
How did this 19-year-old end up dead just a few miles from home in the middle of the night?
First responders get to the scene and they first think that it is a gunshot wound, and they thought it was a homicide, so they called SLED to assist the scene. And they also call Highway Patrol, and they start throwing around the possibility of maybe this was a hit and run.
When there's a hit and run, often there is evidence, a broken mirror, a scrape of paint, shards of glass or plastic. Maybe there's skid marks.
There's nothing.
Investigators with SLED and the Hampton County Sheriff's Office decide it must be a homicide, and they release the Highway Patrol from the scene. But then the pathologist who performed Stephen's autopsy determines it is a hit and run, surprising the investigators.
That makes it Highway Patrol's case.
The Highway Patrol just didn't buy it, that this was a hit and run.
It does not appear to be, in my opinion, struck by a vehicle.
He had no abrasions, no torn clothes. His shoes were still on his feet. Cell phone still in his pocket.
When somebody's hit by a car, the force of it usually pops shoes off and shoes go flying. Stephen's shoes are still on his feet.
With little to go on, the South Carolina Highway Patrol has a mystery on its hands.
The theory was that Stephen was walking home after he ran out of gas, and a mirror of a semi-truck hit him in the face.
But Stephen Smith's mother did not believe that.
A mother knows her child. And no, my son would not do that. He would not be walking in the road. He had his cell phone. He was 6 miles from the house. He would have called somebody.
Just days after Stephen's death, the county is alive with gossip. From the coffee shop to the barber shop. People are saying, have you heard? This is what I heard.
Sandy Smith hears the same rumors, and she shares them with investigators just days after Stephen is killed.
Have you heard any rumors or anything like that?
The rumors that's going around Hampton that everybody keeps coming up to me and saying it was Murdaugh boys.
The Murdaugh boys?
Yes, whoever they are.
There's controversy around Stephen Smith's death. There are some who say this was a hit and run. Others say this was an intentional homicide.
They began interviewing people who may have known Stephen, and the name Murdaugh starts popping up.
There were other names in that investigation. It wasn't only the Murdaughs, but there's the name and there's the name again. The Smith family told police Stephen's dad was contacted by Randy Murdaugh right after they were contacted by the coroner, informing them of their son's death.
No lawyers have contacted you about anything?
Well, the day that Stephen passed away, Randy Murdaugh was the second person to call my dad after the coroner, and he said he wanted to take the case and it would be free of charge and everything. And my dad's a little iffy on that.
Why is this guy calling out of the blue, and we just found out our son died? This is just a weird thing.
Why would they be worried about my son's death?
The most persistent rumor told to police alleged that Paul's older brother, Buster Murdaugh, was involved.
Stephen Smith was a classmate of Buster Murdaugh, and they went to Wade Hampton High School together.
But we don't know if those people giving these statements had direct knowledge of this case or if they were repeating rumors.
I heard a name, and that name was, he goes by Buster Murdaugh. We just heard that Buster did it. So after that, I mean, everybody know who Buster is, and like his family know that, so it was kind of like shocking.
start checking it out, but they can't get to the root of where this rumor came from. They can't really make any headway with it.
You are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You're the 9th person that I've talked to in reference to this rumor, okay?
The Highway Patrol tried to contact Buster Murdaugh one time, according to the file, but it said didn't answer.
Neither Buster Murdaugh nor anyone in the Murdaugh family has ever been charged in this case. The family denied any connection to Stephen's death when I sat down with them in June.
I know who Stephen Smith was, and I know his family. I know of no connection whatsoever with Buster or Paul or my family to Stephen Smith's death.
And that was shortly before SLED opened up their own probe into Stephen Smith's death based on information that they were able to get during the investigation of Maggie and Paul's double murder. Since then, Randy Murdaugh has declined to comment about the statement Stephanie Smith made to investigators that Randy offered his legal services to the family. We also reached out to Buster Murdaugh, but the family has declined further comment at this time.
But the glare of the investigation into Maggie and Paul's double murders is raising more questions than ever about a different untimely death.
A lot of people said, did you hear what happened to the housekeeper? And I thought, no way. And then I was looking through the public index of different documents associated with Alec Murdaugh, and I find a wrongful death settlement for $500,000.
Gloria Satterfield, who worked for the Murdaughs for years, had died after a trip and fall accident, and Alec Murdaugh's insurance company had agreed to pay $505,000 for her wrongful death. Gloria Satterfield was in the fabric of the Murdaugh family.
She was a hardworking woman, a people person. You know, everywhere she went, she never met a stranger, always made a friend.
When Gloria started working for them, she took pride in that and honor in that, and she treated them like her family.
My sources have said Paul looks at her like a mother.
He was barely walking whenever she started working for them, and he called her Go-Go, and she called him Paw-Paw.
What we think we know about Gloria's death is that she was in the home of Alec Murdaugh, that Alec's dogs had jumped up on her, causing her to fall downstairs.
911 emergency. My housekeeper has fallen and her head is bleeding. I cannot get her up. She's not going up the steps, up the brick steps. She's cracked her head and there's blood on the concrete.
She lives for 3 weeks. She never regains full consciousness.
She laid in the bed and I took her hand and asked her, Mom, what happened? And she couldn't tell me nothing.
There were ups and downs, you know, you thought things were going to get better, and of course they didn't.
According to the family, at her funeral, Alex Murdaugh says, it's my fault that she died at our house. She tripped over our dog, and so I'm going to get you a lawyer. He can represent you, and he can bring a lawsuit against me. I will agree to it, and you will get money for it.
We didn't have no reason not to trust them. You know, we've known them all our lives.
He always took care of Gloria, you know, and he knew how important her children were to her.
The Satterfield boys would say Alec Murdaugh looked him in the eye and said, trust me, I got you guys. You're going to get a lot of money, and I'm going to handle everything.
But incredibly, one of the most shocking pieces of the story was still to come.
Alec Murdaugh was shot in the head and wounded on a rural country road yesterday.
Alec Murdaugh got shot? I mean, his wife and son have just been killed, and now he's been shot?
For 3 months, there's virtually no news about the investigation into Paul and Maggie Murdaugh's double murders. But as the summer ends, there's a new emergency.
On September 4th, 2021, a 911 call comes in from Alec Murdaugh.
I got a flat tire, and I stopped, and somebody stopped to help me. And when I turned my back, they tried to shoot me.
A murder mystery in South Carolina taking a bizarre turn. Alec Murdaugh was shot in the head and wounded on a rural country road yesterday.
He was airlifted to a hospital in Savannah, Georgia.
It's like, what? Alec Murdaugh got shot? I mean, his wife and son have just been killed a few months earlier, and now he's been shot?
It's almost too much to believe.
Oh my God, they got targeted. Like, that was the immediate reaction. Something's happening. It's very bizarre.
Is somebody trying to finish the job by killing another member of the Murdaugh family?
But there's confusion every step of the way.
Police are saying one thing, his attorney's saying something else.
When SLED sends out their first press release about what happened, they make it abundantly clear that this is a superficial head wound to the head. Immediately, doubt is cast on what happened. Who's lying here?
2 days later, on Labor Day, Alec's PR team released a statement.
This morning, the husband in a South Carolina double murder mystery breaking his silence for the first time. Alec Murdaugh putting out a statement.
He says that he's resigning from his law firm and that he's checking into rehab.
I have made a lot of decisions that I truly regret. I'm resigning from my law firm and entering rehab after a long battle that has been exacerbated by these murders.
Alec Murdaugh is, he says, addicted to opioids.
To just send everybody into chaos. Like, what is going on here, and why are they telling us this?
If that's not someone saying I have committed crimes, I don't know what is. It's wild.
As everybody's trying to process what that means, another statement comes out from Alec Murdaugh's law firm.
Overnight, a new bombshell ABC News has learned. Alec Murdaugh resigned from his family's law firm amid accusations of misappropriating funds just the day before he says someone shot him.
They alleged he'd been doing that on an ongoing basis for years.
His brother Randy Murdaugh issued a statement saying, "While I support him in his recovery, I do not support, condone, or excuse his conduct in stealing by manipulating his most trusted relationships."
And it kind of just keeps snowballing from there.
He loses his law license. He loses his privileges to be an assistant solicitor. I mean, his life is falling apart.
People are saying, okay, so he's probably not the victim in this case. Something weird happened with this shooting.
Clearly the story that they said initially about the shooting cannot be the full story.
And breaking overnight, a suspect is now in custody in connection with the mysterious shooting of Alex Murdaugh.
A South Carolina man is behind bars for shooting prominent Lowcountry lawyer Alec Murdaugh.
Curtis Eddie Smith, who is a distant relative and a former client of Alex Murdaugh, is charged with assault and battery of a high aggravated nature, pointing and presenting a firearm, insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and assisted suicide.
Assisted suicide would mean that Alec is trying to commit suicide, which is shocking.
According to a police affidavit, Murdaugh admitted to investigators the plan was for Mr. Smith to murder him, leaving his son Buster to collect a life insurance policy valued at approximately $10 million.
Whatever's happening, you can see that Alec is clearly spiraling.
The life of a prominent South Carolina lawyer at the center of a complex Lowcountry mystery unraveling. Alec Murdaugh's arrest is now imminent.
Alec Murdaugh was charged with insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and filing a false police report, which are all felonies.
All right. He's handcuffed. He's wearing shackles. He's wearing a Hampton County jumpsuit.
While the charges here under the law are not violent, the underlying facts are violent.
The idea of Alec Murdaugh once being such a powerful figure in this area, a member of such a legal powerhouse family, quickly shatters.
A picture's starting to come into focus, and it does not look good for Alec Murdaugh.
Who is this guy? What happened? What mistakes has he made?
This morning, another twist. Authorities announcing Wednesday they have opened a criminal investigation into the 2018 death of his longtime housekeeper and nanny, Gloria Satterfield, as well as the handling of her estate.
Remember that wrongful death suit for Gloria Satterfield? Her sons say they never got a dime.
Alex Murdaugh took that money.
But those alleged financial crimes may be the least of his worries.
People are starting to wonder whether a man who says he hired someone to kill himself could be involved in the death of his wife and son.
history. Alec Murdaugh, whose wife and son were shot to death in an unsolved case 3 months ago, was found shot himself in South Carolina.
Everything got so much crazier.
Murdaugh's life coming under scrutiny.
It just took this story to a whole nother level.
Coming up, the latest twists in that fast-developing case of the South Carolina lawyer who police say tried to stage his own murder.
Your Honor, he has fallen from grace.
Alec Murdaugh's attorney, Dick Harpootlian, gets up and he basically says, this is the face of opioid addiction.
If anyone wants to see the face of what opioid addiction does, you're looking at it.
It was certainly a bombshell to drop that in court, that all of this was brought on from opioid addiction.
Also appearing in court on multiple charges, including assisted suicide. Murdaugh's alleged accomplice, former client Curtis Edward Smith.
Curtis Smith, what he has said so far publicly, absolutely contradicts Alec's story.
Curtis says, he called me up. He told me to come and bring the truck.
He said that he showed up and Alec had a gun and he had to wrestle him for the gun and the gun went off. That's his story.
According to Curtis Smith, it never even hit Alec Murdaugh.
That's totally untrue. According to Alec, he met with Smith on the side of the road, gave him the gun, said, I'm going to look like I broke down, drive by and shoot me, which is exactly what Smith did. Smith was his longtime drug dealer, according to Alec.
In addition to the shooting charges, he was also arrested on 2 drug charges.
Now, he has not yet entered a plea on any criminal charges, but he denies he's Alec's drug dealer. Meanwhile, Alec Murdaugh is released on bond and sent back to rehab.
The scrutiny on Alec Murdaugh now is at an all-time high.
Investigations are popping up, civil, criminal.
He's facing lawsuits from the boat crash. He's facing lawsuits from his own law firm.
PMPED files their own lawsuit saying that Alec Murdaugh set up a bank account to basically divert payments that he made off settlements. In response, Alec Murdaugh pled the Fifth, refusing to incriminate himself.
SLED opens an investigation into Alec's alleged financial crimes at the law firm.
In the midst of all this craziness, a lawsuit drops from Gloria Satterfield's sons that says her sons never got any of the settlement money.
According to Gloria Satterfield's family, they learned about this settlement in the press.
The Satterfield boys read my story, and that was the first time that they ever found out that a settlement existed for their mother's death.
At that point, we knew that the boys hadn't gotten no money. So I said, well, where did this money at?
They're looking around at each other saying, something's not right.
I actually contacted my sister, my brother, and I said, yo, something's kind of strange here.
According to the lawsuit, Alec introduced Tony Satterfield to his best friend from college, who was also a lawyer, Corey Fleming, who sued Alec for Gloria's wrongful death under his homeowner's insurance. Tony was named the personal representative of his mother's estate.
But Alec had allegedly convinced Tony to resign as the personal representative in favor of a banker that Alec knew, Chad Westendorf.
Alex proposed it to me. We met at his office.
The day after Chad Westendorf took over as personal representative, settlement papers were filed. But the Satterfield family claims they never knew any of this.
It took them some time to develop the courage to go to a lawyer.
They're scared. They're rightfully scared. They're small players who are forced to ask important questions about important people.
We know how to get the answer. You write a letter saying, we're sure there's a misunderstanding. Just send us the evidence of the settlement agreement, the court order, and the checks. When you send a letter like that, lawyers like us, we expect a response. But we got nothing.
The only way to get answers is to file a lawsuit, which we did immediately.
Alec Murdaugh is now accused of taking millions on a wrongful death settlement.
According to court documents, Murdaugh allegedly worked with 2 of his friends, an attorney and a banker, to pocket money which should have gone to the family of his former housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield.
Information starts coming in and developing very quickly. It's not even the $500,000. That was just the first insurance company's settlement.
According to the lawsuit, there was a second settlement that was not properly recorded.
As you can see here, it was never given a docket number, and the case name was actually changed to In Re Gloria Satterfield, meaning it was never connected to Alec Murdaugh in court filings or anywhere else.
It is 100% in the dark unfiled, off-book, off-record.
It turns out to be $4,300,000. $2.7 million should have been paid directly to Brian, Harriet, and Tony Satterfield.
But they say they never got a dime.
Alex Murdaugh took that money. The betrayal of trust is stunning.
This deception, it runs deep, and it hurts because we did think of him as family, and we know Gloria did.
Did he do this to more people? What is he really capable of?
This is an ongoing investigation, Your Honor. This is the tip of the iceberg.
And just this week, a stunning development in the double murder mystery. Police now claiming they know who killed Paul and Maggie Murdaugh.
Back now with those major new developments involving prominent lawyer Alex Murdaugh.
The 53-year-old was arrested last week, accused of stealing millions of dollars in insurance money, which was meant to go to the sons of his family's longtime housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield.
He's arrested again, this time for the alleged theft of the settlement money from the Gloria Satterfield wrongful death lawsuit.
At this point, Alec Murdaugh is charged in two different cases. One for orchestrating his own killing, and one for diverting funds away from Gloria Satterfield's wrongful death lawsuit.
He writes a check for $610,000 to himself. He writes a check for $125,000 to himself. Not a dime goes to this family back here.
A judge tonight denying bail for that disgraced attorney Alec Murdaugh in Columbia, South Carolina.
When the opportunity presents itself in front of a desperate man with a low character, he's probably going to take it. And so that appears to be what Alex Murdaugh did.
This is an ongoing investigation, Your Honor. This is the tip of the iceberg.
Over the next 8 months, Alec Murdaugh is indicted on more than 80 additional charges.
The charges run the gamut from money laundering to forgery. There's also a drug trafficking allegation as well.
He has not yet entered a plea on any criminal charges. In December, he apologized to the Satterfield and Harriet families, saying that he planned to agree to pay back $4.3 million to them. Corey Fleming and his law firm agreed to 2 separate settlements with Gloria Satterfield's sons, and Chad Westendorf was dropped from the lawsuit after he paid back the fees he received.
While Chad Westendorf has not been criminally charged in the alleged Satterfield scheme, Corey Fleming was indicted on 18 charges in March. He has not yet entered a plea.
Alec Murdaugh is now seen as this man who has been tricking people that are closest to him to help himself.
The boat crash was the first domino that really fell, and everything started to come undone.
We are following breaking news from South Carolina, where a disgraced attorney has just been indicted for the murders of his wife and son.
Tonight, the dramatic new turn in this case.
Alex Murdaugh is now charged with 2 counts of murder and possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime.
Coming 402 days after Maggie and Paul Murdaugh were found brutally murdered with multiple gunshot wounds, this was an almost unbelievable twist. Alec Murdaugh, the father, the husband, is indicted. According to the indictments, he acted alone in the shooting of his wife and son, allegedly killing Maggie with a rifle and shooting Paul with a shotgun. SLED Chief Mark Keel said in a statement that his agents and their partners have worked day in and day out to build a case against the person responsible for the murders of Maggie and Paul and to exclude those who were not. He went on to say, "Today is one more step in a long process for justice for Maggie and Paul." Alec Murdaugh denied that he was involved with their deaths, issuing a statement through his lawyer saying that he wants his family and friends and everyone to know that he did not have anything to do with the murders of Maggie and Paul. His lawyer suggesting that authorities concluded Alec was responsible from day one, saying Alec did not have any motive whatsoever to murder them. Just this week, we spoke with Alec's brother, John Marvin, again. He said that his family, the Murdaughs, and Maggie's family remain close, and that as hard as it may be to hear, they remain united as one family seeking the truth.
This is a story that's dominated the headlines because of the powerful players involved. But if you shift the lens slightly, it's also a story about regular, much less powerful people who've lost something.
Watching a family of this influence and reputation collapse is a fascination and a sadness at the same time. The complexity of it is really perhaps the most amazing part. I don't know when we'll see the end of it.
Alec Murdaugh is now sitting in jail, unable to meet the $7 million bond on those financial charges. He's officially been disbarred. He will never practice law in South Carolina again. And soon he'll enter a courtroom, the place where his family's name and reputation were built. But this time, he'll be fighting for his own life.